What you see here is a Casablanca Cambridge. 4 blades, 50 inches, antique white and polished brass finish. The Cambridge was Casablanca model number 13, introduced in 1983 at the tail end of the Slumber Quiet Prominence era, and stuck around until 1989 or 1990. The model is essentially a smaller, ornate fan. How some might say the Victorian is the ornate version of the Zephyr, others might say the Cambridge is the ornate version of the Four Seasons. Of course, one slight discrepancy with that would be the blade irons, as they have the 1-inch arm as opposed to the stub arms. And I've said it before, but I'll say it again, I really like the design of these blade irons, with the ornate design filling in the middle as opposed to it just being hollow. I really wish Casablanca used this design on more of their models, but at the same time, the fact that they used it on so few really makes these all the more special. The only other model to use this style of blade iron was the Century 9000, in this exact form. The Broadway Limited and Commodore Vanderbilt had a slight variation of this blade iron, though it wasn't exactly the same thing. Fan has a K4L on it. It uses the same top faceplate as a Casablanca Lady Delta. I've always found that kind of interesting. Stencil blades. The tag can be found on this side, and the full model name is the Cambridge 13000 technically. This one is from 1983. It is a first-year model. Interestingly enough, the only 2 models to have the model number following the name was, again, the Century 9000 and the Cambridge 13000. And they were the only 2 to use this style of blade iron. I wonder if that was intentional. Though most people refer to this fan as just the Cambridge, as by 1984, they had dropped the 13000 from the model name and just called the fan the Cambridge when the primary control method switched over to IntelliTouch. I have seen 1 or 2 holdover models called the Cambridge 13000 made in 1984, as they still used Slumber Quiet. However, by and large, by the second year they had switched over to just calling the fan the Cambridge, and at the same time, with the exception to a few holdover fans, the Century 9000 was discontinued. Though it would have been interesting if they continued that fan with IntelliTouch control and just called it the Century. Anyways, now we'll go ahead and demonstrate the fan, starting with the light. I have 2 incandescent bulbs and 2 LED bulbs in there, which is why they came on at different times. This is just what I had lying around. And now we'll start the fan up as slow as it can go on the Slumber Quiet control. Has that beautiful, aesthetic Slumber Quiet low end speed. And everything you see on this fan except for the tassel pull chain is original to it. Well, actually the motor is not original. I had to change out the motor as something was really weird about it. The original transistor that came with this Casablanca fan was failed, so I put in a new one, and for some reason when I did, the entire motor just didn't work. Maybe it somehow shorted out, so I had to change out the motor for another one. But now it works fine. I also really like the look of a white and brass Casablanca Cambridge, especially with the stencil blades. Very nice look. The Cambridge was only ever offered in 3 different finishes: antique brass, polished brass, and antique white and polished brass. Fairly limited scope compared to most other Casablanca models, but what are you going to do? Something else about this model is that for some reason it always seemed a little bit swept under the rug in terms of Casablanca's advertising, as it was still featured in the catalogs like any other model, but it was weirdly absent from a lot of Casablanca's other promotional materials, such as, if you've ever seen that online video talking about various different Casablanca models, like they say, you can buy a larger fan like the Zephyr, the Delta II, the Victorian, etc. And then they say you can buy a smaller fan like the Lady Delta or the Four Seasons. And weirdly enough, no mention of the Cambridge, even though I know for a fact that model was on the market at the time the video would have been made, so a little strange in that aspect. And of course, in current day, compared to most of the models that were offered around the same time as this one is not quite as common. Definitely not rare, but fares more on the uncommon side for sure. One other unique quirk about the Cambridge model, compared to all other ornate Casablanca models such as the Victorian, the Century 9000, the Columbia II, among others, is that the Cambridge always came with a plain switch cap, the same style that a Zephyr, a Delta, or a Panama would come with. As this one has a plain switch cap, as do all of my other Casablanca Cambridges, and all the images in the catalog, as well as other Cambridges I've seen online, all have plain switch caps. A little strange that they went with that, but again, it does help the fan stand out a little bit, make it a little more unique, which I like. And Casablanca was definitely known for some interesting design choices back in the day, so take this up a bit more to a medium. And it is the only ornate Casablanca model, or with an ornate faceplate, to not also have the ornate switch cap to go with it. Bit odd, but also rather interesting. Probably just a design choice, but it would be interesting if there's a story behind it of some sort. And the camera's having a little bit of focus problems, as it often does when fans run on medium. There is a medium-high speed, and there is a little bit of wobble. I do have the fan on a recall clip because I'm paranoid like that. So that's mostly where the wobble's coming from, as even though recall clips are meant to prevent the ball from slipping through the hang true, they amplify any little discrepancy in the blade balance. to make the fan wobble way worse. Which is a little ironic, but at least you know for a solid fact it's not going to fall. Even though without the clip it'd probably be perfectly fine anyways. And full speed. The Cambridge is definitely one of my favorite Casablanca models, undoubtedly in my top 5, probably in my top 3 as well. And this overall look I really like, even though I'm usually not the biggest white and brass enthusiast. This is one of my favorite looks for the Casablanca Cambridge. And there you have it, an antique white and polished brass slumber quiet Casablanca Cambridge.